Whenever there are early movie screenings and the embargo lifts way before the release and influencers start raving about a movie as if they've just seen an epic film, my skepticism and hesitance go on high alert. In this specific instance, however, I am here to report to all of you that this is the rare occurrence where they were not lying. The discussions around the Odyssey, the Christopher Nolan adaptation of Homer's epic poem set around 3000 years ago, has developed such passionate debates online that I believe it may just be the most discussed film in North America. For there is almost a culture war taking place between the right and left based on the portrayals that the audience got a glimpse of through the teaser and trailer. The casting of characters from Greek mythology and the language in which the characters communicated specifically. I will discuss everything with all of you in great detail. The fact that Nolan won the Oscar for Best Director for Oppenheimer and almost hit $1 billion at the box office, you know that Nolan and his wife Emma Thomas were going to go all guns blazing for their next venture. The film focuses on the journey of Odysseus after the Trojan War. Having spent 10 years trying to enter Troy, the Greeks offered the Trojan horse as a peace offering, only to bamboozle the enemy and win the war. The Odyssey focuses on the king of Ithica, Odysseus, played by Matt Damon, a capable and sharp warrior, and his journey back from Troy to Ithaca. The tumultuous journey that he has to face for the next 10 years with his crew as he sets sail for home that includes a cyclops, giant cannibals, conspiring and lustful witches, horrifying conspiracies by prophets, six-headed monsters, and the influence of gods who dictate one's fate among many elements in their lives of mere mortals are just some of the elements of this special film. The manner in which Christopher Nolan has adapted the Odyssey into a 2 hours and 52-minute feature film is astounding. The practical manner and scale in which the film has been shot entirely on IMAX, principal photography of this movie being completed in 91 days, 9 days ahead of schedule, just makes Nolan the GOAT, who is consistently delivering such bangers meant for the big screen experience. 91 days, and here we have years having passed for movies with several delays and still reshoots to be executed. The man is a different beast altogether. Momentarily pausing on all the Nolan glazing, here's me telling you the good and bad aspects of the film so that you guys can ultimately decide whether to watch the Odyssey in theaters or not. The underwhelming aspects. The debate on language and sound mixing. One of the most contentious features of the film that I was the most cautious of was the language and accents in which the characters communicate with each other. Glimpses of which we had seen in the trailer, and this really split audiences on what they felt about such casual delivery associated with such an epic. You know, dialogues like "you are pining for a daddy you didn't even know" delivered by Robert Pattinson, or "my dad is coming home" said by Tom Holland in the same scene may seem way too contemporary for most people's ears. Christopher Nolan has defended his stance regarding language, saying he consciously decided not to recreate the Hollywood cinema of the 50s and 60s with its reverence to the romantic era or the classical world. While I respect a creator's interpretation of a text, the creative freedom that should exist when adapting mythology, I think it was personally, for me also, an adjustment period with the dialogues and diction. I understand that the language, if one were to really be true to the text, may have been just in Greek, but I don't think a world so epic of kings, queens, gods, and witches needs to be made accessible for the audience with simpler language. It would have been effective irrespective. Due to my preconditioning of watching epics like Troy or Gladiator, even fantasy like Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones, with more formal language and it mostly being associated with English accents versus American, which is the case here, I could not help but feel slightly awkward with some of the dialogues in the film. This is my personal experience. Thankfully, it's not an omnipresent feature that absolutely weighs down the film and its overall quality. What seems like a complete googly, especially when you see it in context to the film, the trolled scene of Damon shouting "let's go" actually works in the film for the context in which it is delivered, not as a call to action to charge for war but to escape. The other technical aspect of this movie that I believe will be unanimously called out and seems to be a persistent problem with Nolan movies is the issue with sound mixing. This has been called out in multiple Nolan movies where the score or the background noise or movement of characters speaking to one another off camera is so loud that it often impacts the dialogue shared between the main characters. This is something that was a huge stumbling block with Tenet. This is something that you will experience in the first 10 minutes or so in the scene shared between Robert Pattinson and Tom Holland, where it genuinely becomes tough to decipher what the characters are saying. The subtitles helped. There is absolutely no denying that Christopher Nolan is a master of his craft, but if there is a consistent feature being called out, especially regarding his sound mixing and levels, I think there definitely needs to be effective change that can be employed for the future. Casting and controversy. The identity war is at an all-time high in North America, and a lot of the discourse around the casting choices of Christopher Nolan was based on 1. Misinformation, and 2. Hating on different choices made to what we assume to be the appropriate casting choices of legendary figures in mythology. I'll come to the misinformation first. Elliot Page is not playing the role of Achilles. This is the rumor that was spread when the teaser and trailer of the film dropped. It immediately resulted in outrage across the internet because what was vivid in people's memory was Brad Pitt playing the valiant soldier and this description of Achilles being unmatched in combat. Elliot Page plays the role of Sinon, a Greek soldier, and the casting choice, with the physical capability and build of the actor visually in context to the story, works for the film. In contrast to what people assumed was a forced casting, I thought actually was an appropriate casting. Lupita as the Helen of Troy was another contentious choice, as audiences and popular media have an idea of what Helen should look like. For the mere minutes that Elliot Page and Lupita feature in this film, it never takes away from the gravity or the stakes at hand in this epic. Nolan in no way is establishing a narrative through these casting choices of letting go of the tale and substituting it with social commentary to being relevant in the modern day. It's just the creative choices he has made, while still doing full justice to the arduous journey of Odysseus back home. There is also Travis Scott as the bard. A lot of the heroic tales from this time were told orally, and Travis is utilized for the same in this film. And no, he does not have a version of Fiend in the Odyssey. It's the part of the tale that one briefly stumbles upon, finds interesting, and then we move on. If you already have these preconceived notions of hatred for this film, of the casting choices, of the language, of the armor being too modern, of the presumed identity politics that Nolan may be slyly implying, then nothing will change your mind. I am here to tell you that these choices do not take away from the epic quality of this film at all. The one performance that I did find awkward, genuinely, and I know it may sound harsh, was Tom Holland as Telemachus. While the attitude is effective of an underconfident and unsure boy, the cadence of delivery, the emotions of despair, frustration, or anger are just stiff versus convincing. It's the only performance that made me feel like an actor did not feel like a part of the Bronze Age, but a timid boy of the contemporary times placed on a movie set. It's not bad, but it's not great either. I know comparative analysis is the devil, but Timothée Chalamet would have eaten up this role. Those who are purists of the text written by Homer would also wonder whether Nolan was able to condense the material in such a way that he still had the ability to focus on everything Odysseus experienced on this 10-year journey back home. Nolan covers it all except the island of Iolia and the power of influencing the winds that is handed over to Odysseus. It's genuinely a feat on how much he covered with such effectiveness. The good. Scale, vision, and marriage. When I tell you that this is the movie of the year, I mean this with utmost sincerity. In an era where filmmakers are so heavily relying on CGI backdrops to emulate scale, are so heavily depending on AI prompts in order to ease voiceovers describing past experiences or origin stories, Christopher Nolan is the rare specimen who is going above and beyond in order to ensure that almost every moving element that you see in the frame is practical and real. I mean, the film has been shot in Morocco, Greece, Italy, Iceland, and Scotland. If you get time, just see the 22-minute documentary that they have dropped on Hotstar, and just the logistical hurdles this production has gone through in order to create a time machine for the audience. Everything from the palaces, the ship sailing across the treacherous sea, the depiction of the creatures Odysseus comes across, it's a sight to behold. Cinematographer Hoytwine Hoytema, someone who has shot every Nolan film since Interstellar, has absolutely hit it out of the park with production designer Ruth de Jong. I mean, the frame of the Trojan horse being lifted from the sea, the onslaught of soldiers when they enter Troy, the tumultuous sea, it all is so epic on the big screen that I'm still distraught at the fact that we can't see this movie in this country truly in the scope and ratio it is intended to be seen. A lot of people were complaining with some of the early screenings of how dimly lit some of the shots were in this movie, but I did not even in the slightest feel that. For even the scenes that are aimed to depict the ship sailing through the worst conditions, practically these scenes would be in pitch darkness, but they are captured with such skill, dealing with Zeus and Poseidon's dramatic calls of thunder and the ocean becoming a beast of its own, that I was just doing the lock-in pose throughout the film. I would have liked the presence of gods and their influence to be a little more than the way the film depicted, but this is where Nolan implies the existence of the Almighty more, which I believe was equally effective. The score and soft launch. While I have communicated my brief issue with the sound mixing in the film, at least in the first 15 minutes, I cannot stop thinking about the absolutely beautiful score composed by Ludwig Göransson. Much like like the language in the film that subverts expectations, it is the case with the score too. The assumption for a movie that is pitched at such a scale would be that the score would be this operatic symphony with hundreds of musicians. But what Ludwig has done in this film is to employ sounds with instruments that are not even recognized today. He has employed the sounds of gongs and drums and bronze ornaments in order to reflect the sound that would be practical in the Bronze Age, the period in which the film is set. These sounds progressively become louder and increase in tempo, and it adds such weight to the scenes. There is not only an epicness associated with this score, but a haunting atmosphere that genuinely makes you feel like Nolan may be soft launching his full-on horror directorial venture through this movie. I kid you not when I say this, we may be in for the most epic horror film if Nolan commits to do so, because some of the sequences from this film are straight up scary. The staging and depiction of Odysseus and his men coming across the Cyclops is horrifying indeed, but Odysseus and his experience with Circe on the island of Aea will make your skin crawl and make your jaw drop. The horror executed in the scene will genuinely make those wonder who are not familiar with the text or what kind of film they signed up for. It's so eerie and ominous. The sequence also shot in the underworld, and the depiction of Odysseus' learnings are haunting. The visual depiction looks like literal hell, and seeing it on the big screen, that visual is just etched in my memory hours later. The combination of Nolan's frames and the score of Ludwig are so epic in these sequences that I'm living for a hypothetical Nolan horror movie in the future. I need it at this point. Set pieces and the cast. Matt Damon needs to understand at this point that if he just decides to travel anywhere and find a way back home, tragedy will strike. It's a genre at this point. But jokes aside, the man genuinely commits physically and emotionally to this tale. You believe the years he has spent in war and at sea. You see the disoriented nature of Odysseus as the screenplay sheds light on this epic in a non-chronological manner. The contrast between his lost state today versus what a determined leader he was during the Trojan War just provides you a glimpse of the range he has conveyed in this film. Anne Hathaway's Penelope is such a standout performer in this movie that I was in awe of the sheer command she had, of the scene, of the tone of delivery, of a woman just on the verge of completely breaking down for the years she has spent just waiting. You can see the deep sadness in both her eyes and demeanor, and both Matt and Anne are truly the emotional core of this story that makes you root for their reunion. Robert Pattinson as Antinous makes you want to smack him right across the face. He is cunning, vile, and a petulant loser who believes he deserves way more than what his antics deserve. But Pattinson channelizes his inner harami to perfection. I mean, when you just look at the cast, it's such a clear indication that Hollywood and its biggest stars just want to be in a Nolan frame, no matter what the screen time. In the supporting cast, I love John Leguizamo as Emmaus, the loyal servant to Odysseus, and Himesh Patel as well, who is part of the crew and develops into almost becoming the right-hand man of Odysseus on this journey. For the screen time Himesh had, it almost blows me away that he was not part of the marketing run for this film. I even loved the brief supporting roles of Zendaya as Athena, Charlize Theron as Calypso, and especially Samantha Morton as Circe. Some of the set pieces are simply to marvel at in this film, be it the attack in Troy and the aura farming that Agamemnon was doing, the experience of the ship as they sail through Scylla and Captorus, and just the way it beautifully ties together in the conclusion. This was truly special. Nolan and the emotion. I mean, think about fate for a second. Christopher Nolan went from being an indie filmmaker to Warner Brothers betting $150 million on him for a complete reboot of the Batman. This happened because the studio wanted to make amends for replacing Nolan for Troy, as the original developer Wolfgang Peterson ultimately directed the film. And now, after 22 years, Nolan himself directs the Odyssey, a story that chronicles the events after the fall of Troy. What a beautiful story this is. One of the criticisms that is often flung towards Christopher Nolan is that he is technically the best at what he does, but his tales may be emotionally distant. Other than Interstellar that still makes me break down in uncontrollable tears, this does ring true for some of his movies, that they are such epics visually, but it's not something that breaks you down in tears. Oh my lord, I was not ready for the third act of this movie that so beautifully comes together that I did get emotional. This is why I will back this movie and recommend it to all of you, because this is what the films are really about. Yes, it's epic in scale, yes, the score and the frames are literal paintings, but how it all ties together to themes of family, love, humans, and their destructive ways, and the place we call home culminates also beautifully in the conclusion, enhanced even further by Matt Damon and Anne Hathaway's performances, that I genuinely concluded that this was hands hands down one of the most memorable experiences I have had in a theater this year. Something that naturally draws me back to watching it again, and I truly wish and hope you get to witness it on the biggest screen possible. This is the most interesting part of Nolan's ability as a storyteller in the Odyssey. He, if you think about it, through many of his stories is depicting characters finding their way back home. Here you've got Greek mythology that employs kings, queens and wars, and a difficult journey across the violent seas, but you've also got creatures, cannibals, gods and witches. But it never in the slightest feels like a fantasy film. It feels like a journey of a mortal at the behest of the world and its mysterious ways due to their own doing. It's a test of resilience, of the human spirit to keep on going, to self-reflect on where they lost their way, and there is nothing more universal and human about it. Often movies dealing with themes beyond what we know as reality seem like such a departure from what we see around us, that they get etched in stone as fantasy only. But Nolan has the ability to make you feel like that the Odyssey was recorded history. That is the magic of a brilliant storyteller. And that was the video, guys. Write down in the comments below what you thought about the Odyssey. Please don't forget to follow me on Instagram. The handle is right in front of you. Follow me at JammyPants4. Also, please support us by smashing the like button and subscribing to our channel for weekly content ahead. Thank you for watching.